I'm Emily Chang, and this is the best of Bloomberg Technology, where we bring you all our top interviews from this week in tech. Coming up in the next hour, Apple rolls out software upgrades from the iPhone to the Mac, TV, and Watch at the Worldwide Developers Conference and fires a shot across the bow at Facebook. We'll bring you highlights and reaction. Plus, Microsoft returns to its developer roots with its $7.5 billion purchase of GitHub. But not all developers are happy. We will speak with Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella ahead. And a new scandal brewing at Facebook after the company revealed it shared user data with 4 Chinese companies, including Huawei and Lenovo. We will discuss the implications of this disclosure and get the reaction in Washington with Congressman Greg Walden of Oregon. First to our top story. This week, Apple held its annual Worldwide Developers Conference in San Jose, California, where Tim Cook took to the stage to welcome developers from around the world.
And I couldn't be happier to announce that we now have over 20 million Apple developers around the world. That's more than ever before.
While no new gadgets were announced, Apple is giving the software that runs iPhones and iPads a much-needed overhaul. Software engineering head Craig Federighi announced iOS 12 with improvements to the operating system's performance and reliability. This coming in addition to enhanced augmented reality apps and new tools to monitor and moderate tech addiction. The overall focus there, improving speed, efficiency, and making us even more connected to our devices, and those devices more connected to each other. We were joined by our Bloomberg Tech senior executive editor Brad Stone in San Francisco and Bloomberg Technology's Mark Gurman, who covers all things Apple and was at the conference.
What stands out the most to me is this iOS app and Mac app merger that we first wrote about all the way back in December. And since we wrote about that, there was a lot of criticism for that story, saying it wasn't true, but I guess that's what happens. So this basically would allow you to run iOS applications on your Mac computers and vice versa. It is a significant sea change for the way apps work. And apps, believe it or not, are more important to Apple than ever before because it is a core part of the company's services business, which the company has outright said is its most important going forward and fastest growing segment, a $50 billion per year business by 2021.
Little I told you so there from Mark Gurman. Craig Federighi also talked about how the focus now is improving performance, this after years of complaints that sometimes the software just doesn't work. Take a listen.
For iOS 12, we are doubling down on performance. We're working top to bottom, making improvements to make your device faster and more responsive.
It's interesting, Brad, there that he's saying we're not going to give you a dramatically different experience. We're just going to make what you have better.
Yeah, and let's be clear, they tout performance improvements every year. I mean, overall, the president makes more news in his early morning tweet than Apple made in its whole announcement today.
Right, no one more thing, no surprises.
Yeah, and look, last year they introduced the HomePod, and then they didn't even launch it in calendar 2017. So, this was an event that was for developers. The news that Mark talked about, apps for both platforms combining, that was really the most monumental announcement we got today. The speed performance is important for Apple because they control the chips, they control the software, they control the hardware.
And now they're making more of their own chips.
Right, and all their users get the new OS updates. Here on my Android, I'm probably using 2 generations ago OS. So they can tout things like that. And they did make a point of saying that even iPhone users with the older model phones will see those performance improvements. Obviously, a reaction to the dust up earlier in the year where they were accused of slowing down phones.
We also got a reaction to accusations that Apple isn't doing enough to prevent tech addiction. Take a listen to what Craig Federighi had to say about that.
We know there are people who would like a little extra help in managing their use of apps. And for them, we've created app limits. So if in your activity report, you see an app where you might want to be spending a little bit less time, well, you can set your own limit.
Mark, the irony was rich here because at the same time they're giving us these tools to monitor how much time we're spending, they're also working on things like Memojis and group FaceTime that'll only make us more addicted to our phones, correct?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Emily. On the surface, it is quite ironic that they would give tools that, over time could inspire people to use their phones less, which in turn would, make less money for Apple. But to be honest here, no one's going to stop buying iPhones or any phones. No one's really going to stop using their phones. It's actually going to become a competitive advantage, I think, because what I think is they have the best implementation we've seen so far of these types of tools, and everyone's going to have them. So we might have a use case for some consumers in a few years from now saying, hey, I want to buy the phone that does the best job of limiting how much I use this phone. No one's going to not buy a phone, but they want the phone that does the best job at limiting that. And that's what Apple's trying to do with this OS update.
That was our Bloomberg Tech Senior Executive Editor Brad Stone and Bloomberg Tech's Mark Gurman. While at WWDC, we also caught up with Thrive CEO Arianna Huffington to talk about the tech giant's push to curb Tech Edition. Take a listen.
Putting these features that help us block notifications, sync them with our calendar, geolocate them, and also give us a clear visibility into how much time we're spending with different apps, games, etc. And all these new features are being integrated seamlessly into the operating system. So Emily, you know how hard it is to change behavior, and what is so exciting about these announcements today is that because they are so seamlessly integrated, it's going to be much easier to use them. We know that we all need to set boundaries in our relationship with technology, but we are all having a hard time doing it because we are becoming increasingly addicted. And even in this convention center here, with 5,600 developers from 77 countries, when Craig Federighi announced these changes, there was applause from the developers at the very moment when he talked about being able to set app limits, to decide how much time you spend on apps. And these are people who are making their living from apps. So it shows how far the culture has changed.
Well, the irony is rich, though, because at the same time, Apple is releasing features that make the technology even more addictive, like the Memojis and group FaceTime. I mean, shouldn't we just be turning off our phones? Or is it really on the company, or is it up to us?
It's obviously ultimately it's up to us, but being empowered with tools and with knowledge about how much time we're spending on our phones is key. Because, Emily, a lot of people don't even recognize how much time they're spending on their different social media apps, games, etc. And also, Apple announced very important parental controls. So with one touch, you can limit how much time your child is spending on certain apps. You can put downtime on their phone, so when they go to sleep, they can't access their apps and social media. So going also much deeper in this very important area, because we know how difficult it has been for parents to navigate their children's relationship with technology, and we know the data that there's an increase in mental health problems among teenagers, depression, anxiety. So this is really the moment when we urgently need to respond to what is happening.
My conversation there with Arianna Huffington, Thrive Global CEO from Apple's Worldwide Developers Conference. Well, the U.S. has reached an agreement with ZTE, the Chinese telecom maker that was basically shut down after being banned from using American suppliers. ZTE will pay $1 billion fine and put another $400 million in suspended penalty money in escrow. Plus, a U.S. compliance team will monitor the company. ZTE was originally penalized for breaking a sanctions agreement. Coming up, Microsoft is going back to its roots. Buy GitHub, a code repository popular with many software developers. Our conversation with Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella next. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Dutch payment processing firm Adyen is heading towards one of the biggest European fintech IPOs in years. Shareholders plan to raise $1.1 billion when it lists on June 13th, valuing Adyen between $7.1 and $8.3 billion. Adyen's payment software will soon add eBay to an impressive list of tech giants that includes Netflix, Uber, and Facebook. eBay had previously been a partner of Adyen's rival PayPal. On Monday, Microsoft announced it is purchasing the coding site GitHub in a deal valued at $7.5 billion. The deal helps Microsoft, which is increasingly relying on open source software to add programming tools. I spoke with Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella right after news of the deal broke and asked what GitHub adds to Microsoft now and in the long term.
If you think about what's happening in the world around us, computing is being embedded in every place and everything, and it's impacting our daily lives and our economy, from precision agriculture to precision medicine or personalized education to personalized banking is being driven by software, and every company is becoming digital, and that world is being built by developers. In fact, there's a LinkedIn stat which shows that development in non-tech companies or developers in non-tech companies like retail or energy is growing by double digits, and 25% higher growth rate there than even in the tech companies. So that just shows that we are in the very early innings of what is going to be a set of tools and SaaS services that are required to empower every developer out there. So that's the real strategic rationale. If you think about Microsoft, we've always been a developer-first company. That's how we got started with the developer tools for the Altair. And now we're all in on open source. And so with that, really the coming together of GitHub and Microsoft makes a lot of sense for us. We can contribute a lot and stay true to the original ethos of GitHub. And that's really how we will operate even GitHub going forward, which is being developer first.
GitHub has had issues finding a way to grow revenue significantly, turn a profit. They raised at $2 billion just a few years ago. What is Microsoft going to do differently to justify this $7.5 billion price tag?
You know, we feel very, very good about the growth rates that GitHub has. But GitHub first starts, whether you're a hobbyist or a student or a small startup or a person working in a large company wants a private repo, to be able to use GitHub as a free service. And then they have done a good job of having a freemium model going from that free service to paid versions of it for organizational use. We think we can scale that by first, though, staying true to building that service up and making sure that it's an open platform for all tools, all clouds, all client platform targets as well. So we think that we can bring a lot in terms of scale and reach to additional customers and additional channels, but we feel very, very bullish about what we can do for developers just on organically growing GitHub.
There's been some consternation in the developer community about this acquisition, and I'm sure you've seen some of this. You know, some critics out there saying this is a sad end to GitHub's independence, that the list of reasons why is endless. How do you reassure them and bring them along?
No, it's a very critical element to this, in the sense we are very committed to keeping that developer-first ethos of GitHub going forward. And that's why we have really, between Chris, who is the CEO of GitHub, and me, we decided to run this company independently, even post-close, operate it as an open platform. And Nat Friedman, who came to us from Xamarin, he was the CEO of Xamarin a couple of years ago, has a lot of open source credentials. He's going to be the CEO post-close. He'll be the new maintainer, if you will, of GitHub. And he'll stay true to what the GitHub community really demands of anybody who's maintaining that community. And so we'll have to earn the trust. There's no question of that. Our actions from the recent past should help assure every open source developer of what Microsoft's intent are. And of course, they should measure us by what we do going forward and hold us accountable.
Speaking of trust, there are new revelations today about data Facebook shared with its device partners. You know, these ensuing controversies could have an impact on Microsoft. How concerned are you about increasing tech regulation?
I mean, overall, I think each company is different here in terms of what their core products are and core business models are. In our case, our entire business model is all about being custodians of data and providing services to both consumers and organizational customers. And trust is everything. In other words, we have to secure the data and use the data to benefit our customers, because that's really our business model. Without it, there is no Microsoft or no Microsoft product. So to me, making sure that we live up to the high standards and expectations of our customers, as well as the regulations that are already in place. Take GDPR. In fact, we're taking some of the core tenets of GDPR and making that true for all consumers and customers all over the world with our services. So that's the approach we're going to take going forward.
You've made some big buys, Satya, including LinkedIn. I was recently speaking with your chairman, John Thompson, who said he's supportive of more big buys if they are as successful as LinkedIn. Should we be looking for you to make more big acquisitions like this? I mean, Netflix, there's perennial speculation about Microsoft's interest there, given that it's the only big tech giant without a huge foothold in the streaming space.
I mean, see, first, for us, obviously, the real focus is on our organic growth and organic investments. We are big spenders in R&D, and that sort of is at the core. But we are always going to look for secular growth markets, whether it's Minecraft or LinkedIn or now GitHub. We look for things where we can grow, and the TAM going forward is going to be expansive. We need to be able to contribute something unique, and that's something that's very important to me. I don't want to get into businesses where Microsoft can't contribute and execute super well on behalf of those customers, and we need to be able to operate them.
My conversation earlier with Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella. Coming up, Elon Musk gave an upbeat outlook for Tesla at its annual shareholders meeting, but did investors buy it? We will discuss next. And a reminder, all episodes of Bloomberg Technology are live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology weekdays, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg. SpaceX has marked its 11th mission of the year. The company's Falcon 9 rocket carried a satellite for longtime customer SES of Luxembourg early Monday. SpaceX is targeting roughly 30 missions total this year, up from a record 18 in 2017. The company's valuation has climbed to about $25 billion with the new funding round, putting it on course to become the third most valuable venture-backed startup in the United States after Uber and Airbnb. Meantime, Tesla held its annual shareholders meeting Tuesday, and the company faced a slew of issues, from production delays to questions around driverless technology to the capricious behavior of founder and CEO Elon Musk. We dug into another point of contention, Tesla's board, and who is on it.
Tesla's annual shareholders meeting this year is a big one. First off, the mounting pressure to shake up Tesla's board. Activist investor CTW Investment Group came first, opposing the re-election of 3 directors: private equity investor Antonio Gracias, Elon's brother, Kimball Musk, and James Murdoch, CEO of 21st Century Fox. These 3 directors are up for re-election, as Tesla's 9-member board serves staggered terms. Then came Institutional Shareholder Services. The largest proxy advisory firm followed suit, urging investors to vote against Gracias and Murdoch, and went a step further to push a separate proposal to split the role of chairman and chief executive officer. Then there's Steve Jurvetson. He's been on leave from Tesla's board for over 6 months, an unusually long time for the director of a public company to be in limbo. Jurvetson parted ways with his own venture capital firm in November after allegations of misconduct. So, why all the pressure on the board? 2 words: production delays. Tesla has struggled to mass manufacture its Model 3. Delays have strained the company's balance sheet, and the stock has suffered as a result. ISS is also concerned that Antonio Gracias' firm, Valor Capital Management Corp., provided consulting services to Tesla, for which it was reimbursed over $34,000, a potential conflict of interest. Tesla's board has long drawn flack for being comprised of some of Musk's closest confidants. In a regulatory filing vouching for the company's directors, Tesla stressed that its mission to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy, quote, requires a board willing to commit to long-term goals. Musk himself has said that producing the Model 3 would take Tesla on a drive through production hell. Still, in Tesla's favor, shares are up over 200% over the last 5 years and just got a boost after a break fix helped Tesla's Model 3 win a coveted recommendation from Consumer Reports.
Those were some of the key issues on the agenda during Tesla's annual shareholder meeting Tuesday. In the end, Tesla shareholders sided with the company's board, rejecting proposals to split Musk's roles and re-electing those 3 directors criticized by an activist investor group. CEO Elon Musk also gave an optimistic outlook, saying he expects to hit the next production goal for its crucial Model 3 sedan by the end of this month.
Currently, the biggest constraint on output is General Assembly, and I think we can probably get to 5,000 a week with the current 2 General Assembly lines, but with the 3rd one, I'm highly confident that we can exceed 5,000 units per week.
We spoke with Tasha Keeney, analyst at ARK Investment, which holds Tesla stock, and Bloomberg Businessweek's Max Chafkin in New York.
The stock opened the morning after the meeting really strongly, and I think that is what investors are reacting to. For the last few months, it's been all about just how many of these Model 3s can they get out the door, because the demand is there. It's just a question of, is Tesla able to get through this quote-unquote production hell?
I want to take a look here at a chart in my GTV library about cars produced every quarter. He says they can get to 5,000 cars a week, but production goals, as we know, have been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. Do you believe him this time?
I'm optimistic. I think Elon Musk is capable of amazing things. I mean, he's literally capable of rocket science. So I think even if he were to say that miss that goal by, say, a week or 2, even a month, we're long-term investors at ARK Invest. We have very high confidence in Tesla. It's one of the top positions in a few of our funds, and we're really looking to the long term here. So it goes past the production numbers. We think this is an autonomous electric vehicle story, and that's the largest opportunity ahead of Tesla. We think it's a $10 trillion market globally, and we're excited that Musk has realized that opportunity, and it seems like he's on track to get there.
Meantime, Tesla is now turning its attention to expanding its manufacturing capacity, talking about opening another plant which will produce cars, battery packs, and power trains in Shanghai. Take a listen to Tesla's Robin Ren, who runs worldwide sales.
We're incredibly excited to build first Tesla Gigafactory outside of the U.S. In China. Specifically, it's going to be in Shanghai. And we have been holding discussions with the government, various governments in China. Really great discussions, great partners. We really look forward to working with them in the years to come.
Max, are there any concerns that Tesla is moving ahead too quickly with its global operations, given that it can't move fast enough here at home?
I mean, it kind of depends on your point of view. I think that when you talk about the sort of Tesla optimists, I think what they're looking at is this future story. And for the future story, that Tasha was talking about, for the future story, China is huge, because China has this enormous market. Even today, I mean, people don't realize this, but many of the best-selling electric cars are being sold in China. The country also just changed the ownership rules for factories, allowing Tesla to open this factory without doing a joint venture. So there's a lot of opportunity there.
Coming up, Facebook's latest data controversy. We will get the view from Capitol Hill with Congressman Greg Walden of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. That is next. Plus, later in the hour, former Apple and Google exec Tony Fadell joins to discuss Apple's moves to curb tech addiction, and if he thinks other tech giants will follow suit. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to the best of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Emily Chang. Another day, another round of outrage at Facebook's handling of user data. Only this time, it is not over a consulting firm with ties to President Trump or a company like Apple. This time, it is with 4 Chinese consumer device makers. The companies in question are Huawei, Lenovo, Oppo, and TCL. Now, Huawei was one of a few Chinese companies barred from having its products sold to the Pentagon and armed forces, and it's part of an FCC ban on federal funds being spent on the company. So once again, Facebook is in a familiar spotlight, having to answer concerns that it's failing to be transparent with how its users' data is being handled by third parties. Our Sarah Fryer, who covers Facebook, joined us with more.
It adds a lot of fuel to the fire, but I want to be clear that Huawei and Facebook have both said that no data was ever stored on Huawei's servers. The thing that's the problem with that statement is we don't trust Facebook anymore. After all the revelations and apologies of the last few years, lawmakers are not really taking that as a clear response to this concern. They want to know why Zuckerberg didn't mention this when he had 10 hours of congressional testimony and he was talking about third-party relationships. Why not bring up these relationships too? And so there are a lot of angry people on the Hill today about Facebook.
Senator Mark Warner saying we need answers from Facebook, the whole story now, not 6 months from now. Senator Marco Rubio, why didn't Facebook just reveal this data sharing deal with Huawei months ago? And don't compare this to deals with other telecoms. South Korean government doesn't control or use Samsung the way China controls or uses Huawei. What do we know about the nature of this data?
So this data, basically what Facebook was allowing these device makers to do is build Facebook app experiences into their phones. These are kind of legacy partnerships from before the App Store even existed on these phones. And some people are still using these devices that have these old versions of Facebook apps. So they haven't unwound these partnerships. Facebook said in April that it was planning to. Remember, they did this big review of all their different relationships to try to find potential privacy holes. And they themselves noted that this was one potential harmful relationship that they should end. So they said that in April. The blog post, unfortunately, was full of jargon that was difficult for a regular user to understand, that this is your information flowing through a device in a way that you didn't necessarily expect.
I want to go back to that memo that Facebook executive Andrew Bosworth sent to the company, where he mentions China and talks about the lengths Facebook will go to achieve growth. In 2016, he says, that's why all the work we do in growth is justified. All the questionable contact importing practices, all the subtle language that helps people stay searchable by friends, all the work we do to bring more communication in, the work we will likely have to do in China someday, all of it. It certainly is not a good look.
It's a terrible look, but the Huawei phones are used all over the world, including in the United States, right? And so what Facebook is arguing is that they need to have their app on one of the most important phone manufacturers around the world. And so that's kind of the way that they're staging this, that other companies, including Google and Twitter, have their services on Huawei phones too. Yet to be seen whether there's any harm that has come out of this deal that we have not seen yet in the reports.
We then turned to The View from Washington and spoke with Congressman Greg Walden. He represents Oregon's 2nd Congressional District and is the chair of the House Energy and Commerce Committee, which questioned Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg in April.
It's about communication between Silicon Valley and Washington, D.C. and lawmakers, and about Silicon Valley and trusting communication with their customers. I mean, that's what this is all about. And that means you have to have clarity in the conversation. That means you have to have full disclosure in the conversation, whether that's at a witness table before Congress or in a agreement with your customers. And that's, I think, why users are frustrated and why members of Congress, as their representatives, are frustrated. And we got a lot more work to do here.
Do you think Mark Zuckerberg was truthful in his testimony? Was he misleading?
You know, I don't know about either of those things. I think he was truthful. I think there was obviously more that they found out along the way, more that they knew. Some they may have nuanced. I don't know. But, you know, in situations like this, you're much better to get it all out on the table early on, and especially when you're dealing with Congress. We're trying to figure out what happened, where did it happen, with whom did it happen, and what kind of exposure did users' data have, and to whom, and what control should they have over that? I mean, that really gets back to this trust and communication issue that's so important, whether it's with us in Congress or with consumers who are users.
Other lawmakers are incensed. Senator Mark Warner tweeting, "We need answers from Facebook, the whole story now, not 6 months from now." Senator Marco Rubio saying, "Why didn't Facebook just reveal this data sharing deal with Huawei months ago? Don't compare this to deals with other telecom companies. The South Korean government doesn't control or use Samsung the way China controls and uses Huawei." What is more concerning about the fact that these are Chinese telecom companies that are already under scrutiny by the U.S. government?
Right. And I think that is the heart of the matter here specifically. It's really twofold. One is the alleged past practices or current practices of some of these companies is troubling. That's why there are these discussions in national security settings. But beyond that, it is, why wouldn't you tell us? I mean, it's a pretty big question, but a pretty easy question. Why wouldn't you fully disclose? You should. They should have. And this gets back to why I think Silicon Valley would be well served by the CEOs, other than when they're in a crisis situation like Facebook is now, to come and share with us in Congress what their strategies are, what their agreements are, what their recommendations are. It's why I've invited them to do that before my committee. And so far, we don't have any takers voluntarily, but we'd benefit from their presence.
Are you going to demand that Mark Zuckerberg come back?
You know, first of all, we're going to follow up on our demand that he answer the questions that we've submitted. Now, for the record, there's some 3,000 questions that came from Congress to Facebook. So I realize they've got to sort through all that and give us honest and full disclosure and communication back. But clearly, with each one of these revelations, it starts a whole nother cycle of what did you know and when did you know it, and did you know it in time to have disclosed it but didn't. I mean, that's not good for Facebook, and Facebook's a great American company. It's a great innovator. It's like these other companies are. But they've gotten to a place where they're under intense scrutiny now, and they've got to get it right, and they've got to be fully transparent and improve their communications and their disclosures.
So a Facebook spokesperson has said the relationships didn't need to be disclosed because they were already public and announced by Huawei at least twice in 2011. Facebook mentioned Huawei as one of its partners in a 2012 blog post and has said other tech companies had similar arrangements. What's your response to that?
Sounds like it was written by a technical lawyer. And that's not, I don't know that we were going back and looking at every blog post ever posted. And this gets to the point about trust and communication, whether it's in a relationship in your family or with Congress. You got to realize and understand what's fair and what's fully disclosing. We're going to go back. We're looking at the questions that our members ask and the answers that we were given now in much greater scrutiny of the detail. Because if we're going to, lawyer this up, then things get pretty technical pretty quickly, and that's not good for Facebook or other companies. But if that's what we have to do, I guess that's the path we have to go down.
You've been pushing other Silicon Valley CEOs to testify, and I know you recently met with Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey. Are you concerned that other tech companies like Twitter, like Google, have similar relationships with the Chinese government or Chinese companies in a market that they have been trying to court for a very long time?
Well, let's face it, we don't know the answer fully to that, do we? Because clearly when we had Mr. Zuckerberg before the committee for 5 hours, this was not disclosed. They felt they had been disclosing apparently of it in the past. So we don't know. We should know. And this is again where these companies would benefit by coming before our committee voluntarily and sharing and answering questions. The American people have a right to know, and they have a right to know more than some legalese in a disclosure agreement that, frankly, nobody reads or understands, and beyond that, you can't edit it anyway. So they're just ignored. You hit click and agree, and off you go. And who knows what's behind it? And I think that's what really troubles consumers. They're not sure they can trust now some of these agreements and how their data are used or not, and with whom or not, and what's been scraped or not. And I think they're saying in this information age, something needs to change here. My preference is that the tech companies would realize this and come to terms with it on their own. And otherwise, they're going to end up in a regulatory scheme that may not be what's good for them or, frankly, the country, because frequently Congress tends to overreact, and we don't need to do that if we can get the answers and trust in those answers and improve that communication. So again, the invitation's wide open for the CEOs to come, and I hope they will, because different companies manage this differently. They ought to come and make their case before the representatives of the people, much like they do at conferences all over the world.
I do want to ask you about ZTE. If the Trump administration does do this deal to save ZTE, are the national security risks that the U.S. government has associated with this company, are they still valid? Is ZTE as much of a national security risk as it once was?
You know, I've gotten more into this discussion with the administration as late as last night, because I was concerned and have been about ZTE and these other companies, for any foreign company, and their role in the U.S. and what they do and how they do it. Based on what I've learned, I'm a little more at ease that they would put in place requirements and audits and things that would make sure independently of what these devices do or don't do. If that's the case, it fixes it a bit. But I think we have to be on guard. We know the kind of cyber attacks our country faces from bad actors all over the world, whether it's China or North Korea or Iran or you name it. And we've got to be vigilant here. They're playing for keeps in these other countries. Often this is state-sponsored, and we have to understand the repercussions for national security, for intellectual property theft. I mean, it's just out of control.
Coming up, Apple moves to help curb tech addiction. We will hear from a tech leader who has been championing this cause to Tim Cook. Tony Fadell joins the show next. And later this hour, our exclusive interview with Match Group CEO Mandy Ginsberg, how the company is responding to Facebook's push to launch its own dating services next. This is Bloomberg. Fox has gotten approval in the UK for its takeover bid of Sky Media. UK lawmakers said Fox's $15.6 billion acquisition can go through, provided it sells off Sky's news division. The move could pave the way for Fox to increase its bid for Sky to keep rival suitor Comcast at bay. Rupert Murdoch has said he plans to then sell Sky to Disney as part of a $52 billion sale of most of Fox, which Comcast is also trying to buy. At the Worldwide Developers Conference this week, Apple rolled out new features to curb the length of time its customers use its devices, including time limits that will switch some apps off and new parental controls. The man who helped start the smartphone revolution at Apple has been speaking out about the dangers of tech addiction for quite some time. Tony Fadell, a former Apple and Google executive, is now a principal at Future Shape. He joined Caroline Hyde from Paris on Tuesday to weigh in.
You know, we had Tim Cook actually going on record saying that he was very surprised once he got the tools at how much he was using his devices, more so than he thought. And so I think now it's no longer an open secret. We're all talking about it, and we're moving ahead with these new tools, such as Screen Time from Apple. So I think it's a great first step, but I think there's still a lot more we can do and should do, because this is a problem that's not going to go away anytime soon.
What further steps could be taken then?
Well, you know, interestingly, if you look at it, what the data they're going to be telling you about how much you're using these devices is really just about your iPhone and your iPad together, which is great. It's combining the two. But it's not actually going into your time on a computer. If you look at it, most adults and older kids, they actually are spending 30 to 50% or even more time on a computer. So to only have one part of your digital life being represented by that data, along with how you use your connected TV or your connected watch, all of those things need to be put into this data package for transparency to see how much you're really using devices in general, not just the ones in your pocket.
And what about going across platform? How do you see that working out? Because many don't just have one particular Apple product. They might have an Android as well in a different format.
Well, that's a really interesting question, and I think that's something we're going to have to grapple with. But if you look at it, for the most part, most people are Android platform or their Apple platform or what have you. So right there, if we can fix that, that's 2 billion users that we could get going. But you're right, we do need to address that. That's going to be a little bit more difficult because it requires the two companies really working together on platforms and those kinds of things. But hopefully that might happen over time.
I mean, in many parts, this was your advice. You said that you were having conversations with those on the inside of Apple about these concerns of yours. Did they
really action what you advised? Are you still having conversations? Did you speak to Tim Cook himself?
Well, I over email I did, but I also spoke to the other people who work with Tim that I've known for years, and so I don't know if it was based on my advice or what they were already working on. But it was really great to see these kinds of steps being taken. But again, I think we need to go further, and that means that these new tools need to also be available to third parties. So APIs and data APIs for control and data, so that third parties can create specific solutions for different types of people who have different types of needs. Apple can't make these kinds of specific differences in the platform, but that's why they have the App Store, to allow third parties to make customized things. So you could think of a digital Weight Watchers, right? Or being able to combine your physical activity with your digital activity in one calendar. Apple's not providing that today, and maybe they don't need to do all that, but they should allow the third parties to be able to make access to it so that we can get a more robust solution for various different needs.
Talk to us about other third parties. Interestingly, there seems to have been some tension brewing in many respects between Facebook and Apple. And in WWDC, we saw a demo of at Facebook.com being blocked, or indeed some of the cookies there within via the Apple new products. How do you see that falling out?
Well, I think if you look at it, really, there is a set of companies who are in the position to really enable security and privacy of your data and your devices, and that's companies like Apple, right? And Facebook, in some ways, people are saying that they're exploiting that, and they're not being as good to their customers or their users as they should be. And so I think this war is ever going to be there of, are you serving your user or are you serving your advertiser customer? And I think that Apple is taking the high road here, saying it's about security and privacy and not being tracked. And I think they're absolutely right about that. And we can see what Facebook's doing in the press about apologizing and trying to fix things. I think they have a long way to go, but I think the industry in general, not just Facebook, has a long way to go to address these kinds of issues. And we're waking up to it, and we're no longer just letting it be.
That was Tony Fadell, former Apple and Google executive, currently a principal at Future Shape, speaking with Bloomberg's Caroline Hyde. Still up, Match Group CEO Mandy Ginsberg joins us. What she thinks about Facebook trying to get in on online dating. This is Bloomberg. Just last month at Facebook's annual F8 event, the company announced it would be rolling out a new dating feature. A fairly bold move as the social network tries to win back public trust over how the company collects and uses customer data.
It's going to be in the Facebook app, but it's totally optional. It's opt-in. If you want, you can make a dating profile. And I know a lot of you are going to have questions about this, so I want to be clear that we have designed this with privacy and safety in mind from the beginning. Your friends aren't going to see your profile. You're only going to be suggested people who are not your friends, who have opted into dating, who fit your preferences.
Match Group owns the dating apps Tinder, Match, OkCupid, Plenty of Fish, Hinge, and Our Time. Shares fell more than 10% on the news. That is the most since November 2016. But the company says it's not worried about Facebook putting the moves on its business. According to data from Piper Jaffray, millennials are using Tinder more than any other dating app. Mandy Ginsberg, Match Group CEO, joined us for an exclusive interview.
We've been in the dating business for 20 plus years, and our philosophy is that every day we come to work every day, and if we can deliver great products and deliver what people are looking for is to connect and meet, then we shouldn't be as the market leader. But I do think that for our biggest growth engine, which is Tinder, which is really the 20-somethings, I think there's sort of two facts. That one is that I'm not sure if 20-somethings are going to go to Facebook to date, so I don't think it's going to get impacted. And then two, what we've seen is that people really do want to separate their dating lives from Facebook.
So you put out a pretty snarky statement when Facebook announced this, and I know that you've been an important developer for them and actually worked with Facebook on dating features in the past. Do you feel betrayed, or is there any bad blood there?
No, I mean, so we've got deep partnerships with Facebook even today, both on the advertising side and on the development side, and so we work with Facebook all the time. I don't think it's hugely surprising. We see in our data, because we survey about every quarter thousands of single people in America, and we see that people meet and connect on Facebook all the time. It's just more implicit, and now at this point they're launching something a little bit more explicit. So we'll see what they do.
So that said, Facebook is 2 billion people, and even though they're having all these problems, 2 billion people still seem to be using it. I mean, that's a lot. They have a lot of data on a lot of people that could be put to helping match people up. I mean, doesn't the scale or potential scale of it concern you?
It's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because what we found, and I've been in the dating category for over 10 years, is that we really grown through product innovation and then just chipping away at that stigma year after year. And there's still a lot of people who are resisting the category. And so if we have the ability, particularly for older users internationally, to say, wow, Facebook's doing it, maybe it'll open up more people and people will be more open to trying a dating app. And then we see that people use 3 to 4 dating apps at a time. So it's not a one-size-fits-all industry for sure.
So I want to ask you a bigger philosophical question. Do you think online dating is good for society? I mean, it seems like it would be hard to deal with swiping left and swiping right, and being a millennial right now would be kind of stressful.
Well, I mean, I think that,
that's the silver lining for me not being a millennial.
Before Tinder, people in their 20s they weren't on dating apps. They would, they'd meet at bars and restaurants and they'd meet out. And so I think what Tinder did and other apps have done is just open people up to so many more possibilities.
But can it make dating harder or worse?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, you still have to meet for a beer or a coffee, and you have to see if there's chemistry. And so I think that, that doesn't change.
But now you've got 30 other people in your pocket.
Well, and you also have to think about not just, this millennial dating, but you have to think that, for people, matches ages 30 to 50. And if you get divorced and you're 45 and you're working all the time, how are you going to meet people? And so I think it's created such an opportunity for people to meet people that they literally never would have met otherwise. And you had mentioned Our Time, which is our 50-plus app too. I said, you're 50-plus, where are you going to meet people? It's very hard with your social circle. So my goal, CEO of the company, is that we really open up those opportunities for every age group.
Now, people's views of online dating are directly correlated to the level of success they had. So I fully understand that. Some people have said, well, I've been on Match for 10 years and it hasn't changed. Where is the innovation in online dating going to come from?
I mean, I think we're constantly innovating on all of our products. I mean, if you look at, what you've seen in the last probably three quarters, we've launched location on Match, which is missed connections, where you can see use cross paths. We've launched location on Tinder, which we just launched recently. We're launching video units, so you can get a much better sense of who people are. And we feel like at every single one of our products, you've got to constantly innovate. And ultimately, the holy grail is to figure out, how do you predict if you're going to have chemistry when you meet face-to-face? And all the product innovation is around helping people get a better sense of if someone's going to be interesting to them.
That was Match Group CEO Mandy Ginsberg. And that does it for this edition of the Best of Bloomberg Technology. We will bring you all the latest in tech throughout this week. Next week, tune in for our full coverage from the entertainment software industry's biggest day, the annual E3 conference in LA. We will speak with Take-Two CEO Strauss Zelnick, Nintendo's Reggie Fils-Aimé, and Microsoft Studios Vice President Matt Booty. Tune in each day, 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. And remember, all episodes of Bloomberg Tech are live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology weekdays. That's all for now. This is Bloomberg.